In this video, I want to talk about ownership. I've talked about it several times and just noticed how much of the new book this topic takes up, but I want to get into it a little bit deeper than I have in other videos, and I want to leave you with the question because, well, I first started getting into strange beliefs back in grad school, reading Michael Shermer's book, and I can't even remember the name of it, but it went into why smart people believe strange things. And the basic idea is that if you're really smart, you can come up with a lot of good intellectual tools to justify a belief, regardless of how strange it might be. Well, what I'm going to do is take that to the extreme. In other words, I'm going to suggest that it's thinking itself that lends itself to beliefs that not only are strange, but become so normalized in culture that they don't seem strange at all. And that's the really strange thing of this, like the last video, that 1% of the world owns 50% of the world's wealth. I mean, what a story. What a strange belief. And of course, that applies only to humans because only us humans have some of the strangest beliefs. So when I talk about ownership, it's really an abstraction. It's an idea. And we can test this. You can't see ownership. You can't touch it. You can't experience it directly in any conscious way. And so I dug up the Oxford Dictionary, and it defines ownership as the state of having complete legal control over something. And I really like that one too because they throw in the legal control, and of course the law is just another set of ideas, another set of abstractions, and so it doesn't really help us too much. And yet we could appeal to the law to determine whether someone technically owns something, but that's like saying, well, do you live up to the illusion that we've collectively created? And if we have, then you've owned it. So anyway, there's a long history of distinguishing between control. And so going back to Roman law, there was one word for control, physical control, which we share that with the rest of the animals on the planet. And not just animals, even you could say that the tree controls the sunlight in some ways. And if you're a physically larger animal, you're going to have control over resources. But the Roman law also brought up the abstract notion of control, and there's a different word for this, and that's what humans have invented. And in this abstraction, it allows you can hold my phone. And so that's a really unusual thing because you have physical control over it, but I have legal control over it. I could appeal to the law and this other abstraction and somehow get my phone back if I had to. And so where does this come from? This is where I wanted to get into things a little bit deeper because 80%, if not more, of the world's population is right-handed. And that's not a cultural thing. That seems to be something deep in our genetic code. There's a lot of stories about what might explain this, but let's just, that's another video. Let's just take that as fact. And of course, the left brain controls the right hand. And when we talk about the right hand, it controls the world. And so think about it. If you want to manipulate the world in any way, you're going to do it with your dominant hand. Tool making, and what do we do with tools? Once we've made tools with our right hand, now we can use those tools to further manipulate and control the world. But what I've stumbled upon recently is that the real function of the left brain, and in exactly the same way that the left brain is specialized for language, it takes aspects of the real world, which is to say things we can consciously experience, and things we can control and manipulate. We have conscious experience of these things, but it turns them into abstractions. And so the left brain turns real water into the sound water. And in that same way, what the left brain was able to do is to take the physical ability to control and manipulate and turn it into an abstraction that we call ownership. And so in that sense, ownership is similar to language. It went through the same process. It's shared mostly by humans on this planet. So if you could communicate to a whale, it would be very interesting to explain that, look, 1% of us humans, we own half of the wealth on the planet. It might be really difficult to get that abstraction across to all the other beings that live far more in the real world. The same thing goes with the self. So the left brain has conjured up this idea of a self. And here's where it gets interesting, because the left brain was able to create the idea of ownership, the abstraction of ownership, and marry it to the other abstraction of a self, because that is also just an idea. And so you can't have ownership without the idea of a self. And so we've got two left brain tricks happening when it comes to ownership, and I think that's why it's so easy to be completely bamboozled by this. And that's why I think also when John Lennon wrote his amazing song Imagine, he just asked, he knew it would be too hard for us to really give up our possessions, to give up the idea of ownership. But could we at least just imagine that there were no possessions? And so when we get to that point, again, that's a tricky exercise. Just imagine there are no possessions. But I'll leave you with a question. How would the world be different if the idea of ownership was actually experienced as an idea? In other words, what would happen if the whole world woke up tomorrow and recognized no one owns anything and there's no one to own it in the first place?